Hi, let's talk about learning French at a high level and how it can help you. I think that the very upper levels of language teaching are also the most elementary, whether you're a beginner or not, strangely. And I think that it's a generalized false assumption to believe that high-level contrastive linguistics that can be included in an ordinary French class is a layer of varnish that you put on afterwards. I think it's a bad bet to say, okay, my tutorial classes may not be that great, I can start off small and even hope to reach mid-level, and if I need anything better I can always look for it later. What I'm talking about practically is when your teacher or tutor can do that linguistic and cultural crossover between English and French. And I think that is the highest level that you should expect and that you do need as a necessity. For example, when your teacher knows which idea a simple hello, how are you carries in both languages, what it means in French and what it means in English, or how we build anticipation in a story we tell, or whether your teacher knows how each language insists on different aspects of life, because it will reflect in the French that you try to use and will lead to unnecessary difficulties that your tutor needs to monitor in real time. They need to see clearly into what you're trying to express and why you're doing it. I think you do need that bilingual teacher who truly recognizes what you're attempting to express in French, and they need to see your starting point clearly, which is English and all the culture it includes, and know why it is you're saying what you're saying. And to explain why I believe all of this to be true, I'm going to take you on a little trip towards levels of complexity that few people ever touch. It's so up there that it's not part of language learning that we ever usually speak about in tutoring or even in local language schools, or even at universities for that matter. It's just not something we usually talk about. And yet to some of us, because I'm not alone thinking this, it's the absolute basics. The highest level is also the absolute basics. So I propose we get to the core of the problem. The first thing is that you're likely working with a tutor or a teacher who only has a partial vision of yourself as a learner. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a fact. If they're not natives of English, or whatever your native language is, and if they don't teach English as well as French, they are by definition operating with partial vision, meaning that they don't know about your linguistic and cultural identity. However, if it was so simple, it would be half a problem. When we look at both languages, English and French, the differences between the two, between English and French, are not only in the grammar of those languages. That's just the first level of difficulty, how the two match up. What I'm saying is that even if your French tutor is an expert in English grammar, there would still be a layer that they would not access. Why? Because few people ever do. And that's the part that's so important and only comes up in specialized talks, usually in academia. These tutors are already missing the first layer, most likely. That's the grammar of English as opposed to the grammar of French. They're missing that first level, but they're also missing a second layer, a second level, the pragmatic level. All the cultural things that make up English. How language ties to identity and to thinking. That's the pragmatic level. This second layer is when you try to express things that would work in English, in your English-speaking brain, but in French. So you have to know that languages are tied to a culture. Languages distribute emotion, enthusiasm, vagueness, understatement, and social meaning quite differently. Let's look at an everyday example. Your kid goes to summer camp, they tell you they've made a little friend and everything's going well, they may have exchanged playing cards or something, that they've made a little friend at summer camp. You tell your neighbour, oh, she's loving summer camp, oh yeah, she's already made a friend, you know, oh wow, says your neighbour. Okay. The underlying message of this anecdote in the English-speaking culture is everything's going well and I'm sharing good news because that's the way it works socially. That's the reason to speak about the summer camp, okay? And your neighbour understands this. These are social codes. This exact same example about summer camp doesn't carry the same weight in French. That's the pragmatic level. A French person might interpret your anecdote about the summer camp in a much more rational way. I said they might. I'm not saying that French is more rational. They might wonder why you're boasting about your miracle child. They might wonder why it makes you so happy. They might see this more factually and say, okay, cool, well, essentially your kid made a friend. They probably won't tell you this, but it might be what they instinctively think. Okay, your kid made a friend at summer camp. Wonderful. If your French teacher doesn't have the ability to put you back on track and say, okay, you're trying to speak emotionally with a language that doesn't really work this way, well, that's a massive problem. A problem to solve. You might even think it's not that much of a problem. Does it really matter if a French-speaking person misunderstands my anecdote? I think I can tell you why. You might think it's not important, because this type of language teaching is at a level so high and so rare that barely any teacher ever touches it. How can we worry about a problem we don't know exists? What I see in my face-to-face classes is that in order to develop proper conversational fluency in French, you'll often need to be put back on the rails by someone who knows as a native the logic of your first language and who understands why you do what you're doing. And as soon as you get lost in English-speaking descriptions, your teacher needs to recognize this immediately in an instant and say, okay, French doesn't really work that way, build a sentence this way, leave aside all this English that's seeping into your French. Speakers of English so often get entangled in these sentences that they try to build to mimic how they would say things in English. And all of this might still seem very anecdotal. You might be thinking, okay, well, I'll just be a bit less emotional when I speak French, because French is supposedly more rational, which isn't true at all. It's not so simple, unfortunately. So many things you might want to say in French simply fall flat to a person who can't recognize what you're really trying to achieve. You might want to speak about a barbecue you did on Saturday. In the American culture, the occasion might imply a certain social event. A barbecue in America isn't a barbecue in Europe. There's a certain symbolism behind it. I hear this in English, I know what to do with this information and what question to ask next, because I know it's tied to a certain culture. If I hear the same sentence from a British person, it's a different event still. It's not the same barbecue. And if I hear this from a French or a Belgian person, it's a different event yet. In each case, I know where to steer the conversation, what to say next. And if you think I'm picking my examples to prove a point, I'm not. Just watch any program on TV. Whether it's the way they advertise food, the way they talk about sports events, or even the news, it's deeply embedded in culture. We don't say the same things in the same way or insist on the same things. And what about the vagueness of English? I find English to be very, very vague, as well as being emotional. In English, when you speak, in English you always include how you feel about the message. It's the way it works. And when you speak English, you're always subconsciously thinking, how do they feel about what they're saying? It's a different type of language than French is. So for example, if you say in English, oh yeah, we were like, oh man, yeah, like, we need to get out of here. What's it even mean? You know, we were like, oh man, we need to get out of here. Or what about, yeah, we looked at each other, we went, yeah, well, maybe not, you know, yeah, it isn't the right moment, yeah, let's... What's it even mean? So you looked at each other, you sort of went, yeah man, yeah, no, it's not the right moment, yeah man. I sort of saw him, yeah, he was like, you know, he was like, I don't know man. It's vague, it happens so often in English. There's a lot of vagueness and emotions that are going on here that a native would understand. It goes beyond the words. And you might want to say the same thing in French, or at least try, and maybe your French teacher will be accommodating, because this often happens in the business side of teaching, they might not exactly see what's going on, what you're trying to say. We were like, sort of like, yeah, just get out of here, man. And you will, maybe, hopefully not, risk wasting precious years. Because remember, teaching is a business. When you get a customer, you're happy. So not all teachers will tell you the absolute truth. And once you book a class, it's not in their interest to tell you about some of your mistakes. Even if these French tutors don't understand you fully, what your intention is, or it can really be far-reaching. I mean, they don't understand the actual reason for your accent, or they might not understand why you emphasize certain words and not others, and why you speak with the intonation you do. Or if you show up at French class and you say bonjour, yeah, super, French person might not quite understand the code. You know, oh, well, why they're so emotional? Why do they look so happy? Why? Because of what? Because it's expected in English. In English, you turn up in a good mood. It's a lot more upbeat, but there are so many variables, so many hidden, I don't know, priorities, mannerisms, cultural traits hidden in the language. Anyway, so all this to say that the absolute highest, rarest levels in language teaching, as contradictory as it sounds, are also the most elementary. The thing is, you can't find them anywhere, except with yours truly. My name's Chris. I teach French in a bilingual way for speakers of English. Find me at OuiCommunicate.com. I hope this was useful. Hope to meet you very soon.